Hi, everyone. My name is Chantal Roy, Director of Membership Services at St. Joseph Media. Thank you all for joining us on this beautiful Friday afternoon for a TL Insider Fireside Chat on the future of entrepreneurship in Canada with Michele Romanow. Tech titan Michele Romanow is a serial entrepreneur who started 5 companies before her 33rd birthday. A dragon on CBC's hit show Dragon's Den, Romanow is the co-founder and president of Clearbanc. Clearbanc has invested more than $1.5 billion into 4,000 companies, making them the biggest e-commerce investor in the world. She previously co-founded SnapSaves, acquired by the American tech giant Groupon, and Buytopia.ca, which acquired 10 competitors, including Shop.ca and WagJag. Some quick housekeeping notes. Please make sure to ask any questions you may have or leave any comments in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll open up an audience Q&A at the very end of this hour. Now I'd like to introduce our host, Jason Magnoy, Head of Business Development at St. Joseph Media. Now take it away, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Chantal, and thank you so much for joining us, Michele. I'm very excited. I'm basically just going to use this opportunity to pitch my business. That's the whole thing. I'm very stoked.
That's okay. Jason, I used to get pitched in bathrooms, and that's not happening anymore. So, I feel like I'm well overdue for a good pitch.
Well, thank you so much. So my first question is, how are you, and how have you been holding up during the pandemic?
Oh, thank you for asking. I think I'm a little bit like everyone else. I'm ready for this to be over. You do those like ENTJ things or whatever. And, the other ones I'm actually pretty close on, but man, I'm a 99% extrovert, like secret. Like I didn't know how to watch a movie by myself until I was like 28 years old. I was like, what's the point? Who am I going to talk about this movie with? So like, that's a pretty high level of extroversion. And so, I think I was, out and at an event every night of the week before this. And so this was a very big change. I think one of my closest friends called me and she goes, I know that this was hard for the extroverts, but now this is getting hard for the introverts. So that is when we had hit a breaking point in terms of this. But, again, this is kind of the new reality. I think for me, one of the biggest things I had to do, especially coming into this year, was so much of last year became about survival. It was just like, hey, survive another day, get to Friday, have a drink, like that kind of mentality. And I was living it very much too. And I just told myself, like, Michele, you got to change your mindset. You got to find the silver lining of COVID, right? You always have all these like crazy health and fitness goals. You literally have 0 excuses now because there's 0 parties, there's 0 late night drinks. Like you get to choose that. And as soon as I kind of put myself in the mindset that like, this is going to be a year to thrive. This is going to be a year where I'm going to get to do all sorts of my other goals, and they're not going to be my travel goals, and they're not going to be other things. I just think that really helped me because it has been, like everyone else, I think mentally just a very taxing journey.
Yeah. Well, we got a sense of it in your bio when Chantal was reading it, but I'd love to know more about your career journey. 5 businesses before the age of. How did you do that? So tell us more about the evolution of your career.
Yeah, I was nuts. Let's just start there, right? I went to university to study engineering, mostly because my father told me I could study anything I wanted as long as it was engineering. So I started off with an abundance of choice. And I'm in engineering and I'm like, man, I'm not going to be a very good engineer. So why don't I start thinking about building businesses? I built this little coffee shop on Queens campus called the Tea Room. It's still there like 14 years later, which is a great story. And from there I found 2 buddies and we spent all of our time playing what's the next $1 million idea, and figured out that worldwide supply of caviar was down by 95%. The world had overfished the Caspian Sea. And so we were crazy enough at 21 years old to say no to all of our job offers and just drive to the East Coast and attempt to build a fishery from scratch. That's everything it sounds like. The boats, fishermen, my hands knee deep in fish, like the whole 9 yards. And our thesis was right. Chefs couldn't find the product. I remember running around, probably used a Toronto Life list of all the best restaurants, running around selling our product. And, chefs loved it. The problem was, a couple months later, we went into this giant recession in 2008, and I'm selling the world's most unnecessary luxury product. So my career, I mean, you read the bio and you're like, well, it sounds like it was a lot of success. I mean, 90% of my days, I felt like I was failing. 90% of my days, things were not working. And I was like, man, this is going to be like so embarrassing. And I should just like get a real job. And, you just grind one more day at a time. And so then, after the caviar business failed, we started an early e-commerce company. That's actually, been a really crazy story. We were bootstrapped for 5 years, acquired a bunch of our competitors. We're now public as Emerge on the TSXV, which is a great story. And it's still the old core Bytopia team that's running that. After that, I built an AI app that was sold to Groupon. And then, here's the interesting part of the story. So I'm 28 years old. I get this call on my customer service line at Bytopia that's like, we want Michelle to audition for Dragon's Den. And this Waterloo intern picks up the phone, and we like all think that this is a prank call. Like, this can't possibly be real. So I get on the phone and I'm like, what is going on here? I think they have the wrong person. So I'm like, they're like, yeah, you got to come to the CBC, and like, do you want to do this? And I was like, I think they have the wrong person, but like, I think I should just go see what happens. The audition, they really mock up a show. It's an entrepreneur and there's 5 people auditioning and everyone's talking over each other. And it's like this huge thing. And so I was actually like shocked that I ended up being able to do like the web series and then joining the main show. And so I joined the show, and I think it's just a very different perspective. I mean, I'm 28 years old at the time. The only thing I have done is be a scrappy operator in my career. And I'm hearing all of these entrepreneurs saying, okay, I'm here to give up 5-10% of my company for $100,000. They were all e-commerce companies, because that's what, consumer brands are today. And you'd ask the founders what they needed the money for. And it was always 2 things. I need to go buy customer acquisition, which is I need to go buy Facebook and Google ads, or I need to go buy inventory. And I'm like, wait a second. Why are founders using the most expensive capital in the world, which is always equity? You give up a piece of your company and you give control of your company up to do something that by definition has like a very fixed return. That was the magic of Facebook ads. Inject $1, you get $3 in sales out. And so on the show, I threw out a different deal type. I said, look, instead of me giving you $100,000 and taking 5% of your business that I'll own forever, I'll give you that same $100,000, but I want 5% of your revenue just until you pay me back my capital plus 6%. So for $100,000, I want $106,000 back. This, wasn't very expensive. And I said, look, I just have to see your Facebook ad account, because I was an e-commerce entrepreneur. Like, I'll know what I'm looking for. And that became the beginning of Clearbanc. And it has exceeded, to be honest, Jason, like all of my wildest expectations. I mean, we've now distributed $1.6 billion to 4,000 different companies. We are the largest e-commerce investor in the world. We started an industry behind us where we have international people that have followed the category we've created. It's just been, and because we just use data to make our decisions on who gets capital and how much capital they get, we've backed 8 times more women than the venture capital industry average. We've backed founders, in every state, in every province. It's the same internationally. 70% of our founders in the UK live outside of London. And so it's been an incredibly exciting journey, and we've built it all out of Toronto.
Wow. And that actually takes me to what my next question was, what is Clearbanc? But so why is that more beneficial for a small business owner to be funded in that way versus the other way, which is through equity? Is it just because is it less risk for the owner, or it's more performance? Because what if they don't perform? That's
our risk. So, in the equity world, you give up control and a piece of your business that you never get to go back. It's a one-way street. As soon as you've given up 20% of your company, it is extremely difficult to ever get that back. And then you're taking on a partner that you might not know. And here's the problem. When you're an entrepreneur, here's the secret. You got to do all the work, right? Like I've been an investor and I've been a founder. It is 10 times easier to be an investor than a founder. We glamorize investing, but it is not the same thing as building. And I've been, I look at my angel portfolio sometimes and I was like, wow, this was so much easier than building the businesses I did. And I play both sides of the field on this one. So, the biggest challenge with equity, and equity in many ways is like an elitist system, right? If you go to Harvard or Stanford, like 40% of venture capitalists do, it's not hard for you to get funding. But if you are not from that circle, let's start here. Venture capitalists don't take cold email intros. And it's not like you need to meet one VC. You need to meet 100 VCs to get a competitive process going and to really get the valuation that you're looking at. And then if you do a deal with someone that you don't like, there can be a lot of challenges with that. Problem with banks is that they don't understand digital businesses. So they want personal guarantees. So you're going to put your whole life and your house and your personal savings on the line and do the hardest job in the world. That has never felt fair to me. And I had this horrific story in the early days where PayPal had a personal guarantee on our payment processing in our first e-commerce business. And, we had one deal go wrong and we got into some trouble, and, they were like, you guys are liable for $1 million. And I had $10,000 in my bank account. Like, I'll never remember the fear of that. I woke up in cold sweats every single night for 6 weeks in a row. And so the world has just had a hard time understanding founders, and there wasn't all of this data to really build better products with. And so, look, not a lot of people thought we could do this, right? 250 people on Wall Street told me I was fucking nuts. They said, Michelle, this isn't going to work. You don't understand credit. You're going to lose all of our money. And, we've shown that there is just an extraordinary amount of founders out there that could use, growth capital for acquisition and inventory to scale, and are slowly converting a ton of people along the way to that. And I think it's genuinely like, I would take my own product. This is a way better product for founders than bank capital. And, it's not like VC is bad. I should be very clear. VC should be used when you're taking true equity level risk. So you want to build a rocket and you have 50 engineers or 100 engineers and you're not sure it'll work. That's what equity is for. You want to enter a new country and the whole thing could flop. You want to build a new product. That's equity level risk. But if you've done the hard work to figure out what's building and you just need to scale that, you should be using cheaper capital.
Well, Clearbanc has grown dramatically. So how have you been managing the growth of Clearbanc, and at the same time managing culture and how culture is evolving during the pandemic? Anything you wanted to share there?
I think I'll start with it hasn't been easy. There is, there's so many days I wish I could just reach through my screen and give people a giant hug because we're missing so much of that. But we've just, like anyone else, had to figure it out. What are my top tips? We do all hands twice a week. So people hear from Andrew and I all the time about where our heads are at. They can ask very open questions. I don't believe in anonymous asking questions because I think people are their cruelest when they don't show their face. And in a company, you should be way more honest with that. But we've done a very good job. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did an all hands every single day at 5 p.m. We were just like, this is what we know. We're on the nose of the plane with you. We don't have any more information than you do. And this is how we're thinking about it. And I think that ended up making a big difference.
Wow.
One of the things, we've tried all sorts of health and wellness, and we do the challenges and all of that stuff. I think ultimately people have to build that for themselves. And we can't, just sit here, hunched over a screen all day.
Yes.
But one of the things that we've done that's helped our employees is we actually send a lot of random gifts now to people's houses. So if you were a star in February, if you did something incredible, whether it's a cute little cocktail set or Craig's cookies or something that's just so Toronto and amazing. We have things that just arrive at people's house, which has been one of our ways to show that we're thinking about you and we still care. And that's actually gone a long way. I think about, sometimes what people are paid in terms of sales commissions, and you send them $100 bottle of champagne and they're in tears and you're like, what? This doesn't make sense. But it's all, we are just so much craving that we are noticed and we are listened to. And that was so much easier to even have those really quick chats in the office. But I found that's one of the things that's worked well as we've kind of transitioned to a digital world. And then, again, it's that silver lining, looking for the upside. We've hired over 100 people since the start of COVID. I think it's more now, it's maybe 125. And, we just totally expanded our net. I mean, lots of those were in Toronto, a bunch of those were in San Francisco, some of those were in New York, some of those were in Richmond, Virginia, a couple of those were in London. Like now, even this idea of like returning back to the office, like we don't, like we have so many offices now, and we're able to use that power of recruiting globally to continue to grow out our team.
Wow. That sounds amazing. I mean, I want to go back to what you were talking about in terms of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
A lot of us have ideas. Like I have 80 ideas for like 80 businesses. So how do you go from wishful thinking to actually doing it? There's like a common thread I'm noticing here is you got to have serious grit, and you have to have a very high risk tolerance to be an entrepreneur. But there are lots of people who join our fireside chats, and they are budding entrepreneurs. So what top 3 things can you say to them? Hey, you have this great idea. How do you go from wishful thinking to actually doing it and be successful at doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that, Toronto Life does a very good job of telling raw entrepreneurial stories. And I've read them for years, right? Patrick Chris's story, who's a dear friend. I thought that's spot on. Like, that's what it feels like to build something like that. And even when you've built a great brand like Aloe, it didn't feel easy at any of those inflection points. There was a piece a couple years ago with the guy that gave up everything to build the restaurant in Leslieville. And like, I could still remember, and that is what it feels like. And it doesn't matter if you're a tech entrepreneur and you're running around and your life feels or seems more glamorous. There's so many days that you just lie in bed at night and you're like, is this going to work? Or this isn't working and I don't really know how to fix it. And so, first of all, like, I just commend you guys for like sharing those stories. And I think some of them, end great and they should end great. And some of them also don't end so well at all. But I think I take greater offense to people that don't tell the truth, right? That tell the like glossy PR version of every single story. And there's no entrepreneurial story that looks like that. The core of your question is, how do you get started? You just jump in. You have to think about it like a swimming pool, and you just have to start. You are never ready to start a business. You have never done enough research. The market is never right or never perfect. I can promise you these things, but you have to start. Because, as soon as you get in that water, it's like, wow, it's cold. And then it gets a little less cold. And then you get in there and you can it's like hard to tread water. And then you kind of figure out that you can use a little less effort to tread water. That's like my best analogy for how it feels like. And then you start trying things. And this is the process that makes innovation. And this is where people lose this idea really quickly, because we talk about innovation in society. And not to pick on the media again, but sometimes the media does this. They talk about big ideas, you know what I mean? Like the big ideas issue of 2020, right? And it's like, guys, there are like big trends, you know what I mean? Like AI is going to take over more of our life and drive us cars, but like, you don't start by just having one big idea. You start with a lot of little iterations. You start by that jumping in and you're like, okay, I'm going to make an early product. I'm going to see if people like it. Oh, well, people only like this version of that product. So I'm going to double down on that. And I call this like iteration is actually what leads to big innovation. It's not like this is a myth that entrepreneurs have these eureka moments where they knew. That's just a story people tell when they have to tell, 2-year story in 30 seconds. They're like, this was the moment I knew. I have never known. We thought we were onto a good thing at Clearbanc. We had no idea that it would be this explosive. I had no idea when we first started it that 50% of venture capital dollars went straight to Google and Facebook. I had certainly no idea that the world would go into lockdown and e-commerce would accelerate 10 years in 1 year. I mean, that was just sheer freaking luck. But if you got a great idea, you should just try. And if I'm leaving people with any advice, here's the number. There's 3 reasons you should actually start a business today. The first is that customers are spending more time on the internet than they ever have before. So the ability to capture your customers and to capture their eyeballs, sure, they're not looking at billboards outside, but they're spending all this time on their phone, and we've seen that with usage. So you can capture customers a lot easy. The second is we've had this enormous, wonderful movement around embracing local brands. And so people are looking for local things to do there. They totally understand how unfair this was that big box retailers got to stay open and local community shops did not. And so they're actually looking for ways to support you. And the third thing is that people are probably more forgiving than they've ever been right now, because it is just like everyone is just trying their best. And I think it's and I think people have realized, right? Like you got one life. And when we feel like a lot's taken away from us, it's a really good time to examine, if your day job is doing it for you.
Mm. Like Elon Musk has this thing that he says where it says the initial business idea is mostly wrong. So how do you make it right? And this idea of iteration is really great. But when you're in the process of building your business, you're probably meeting a lot of people who are giving you advice. So how do you drown out the noise? How do you know the advice you're getting is actually good advice? And what's the worst advice you've ever received in your entrepreneurial journey?
Oh my gosh. God, there was like so much advice on like, I should just pick like an easier career. You know what I mean? Like, accountants and dentists are really good careers for women. And I was like, I don't want to be any of those things. None of they're bad things. It was just like, I wanted to do something very different. So, I mean, how do you drown out the bad advice? The first thing I actually think is really important is you limit your circle. So what first time entrepreneurs often do is they have an idea and they ask everyone in their network. And most of our networks are pretty diverse. And so you inevitably end up asking your smart lawyer friend, your smart doctor friend, your smart accounting friend. And what those friends who are very smart but not entrepreneurs will tell you is they're going to identify all the reasons your idea isn't going to work. And the worst part is they're going to be right. It's not like they're going to be wrong. It's that at the early stage, it's actually about jumping in the water. It's not about assessing if the water looks cold enough or hot enough or deep enough or wavy enough. Like, you can spend your whole life making that assessment and you will not be as successful as if you just jump in and figure it out. Wow. And so what I do now is when I have new ideas, I'm really protective and I don't ask all my smart friends who I have wonderful conversations about many other things with. I ask my entrepreneurial friends, because it's the entrepreneurs that know that you don't win by focusing on minimizing your risks. You just double down on the couple things that can really move the needle. And so that's one big partnership. That's one big hire. That's getting one distribution channel right. Like, early businesses are built on things that do not scale for the most part. And so that's how you drown out, it's exactly what Elon says, right? I think his lines have been particularly funny recently when he's like, any words of encouragement for entrepreneurs. And he's like, if you need words of encouragement, this isn't the job for you. There is a lot of truth in that this is something where people say no to you all the time. And it's, again, that shift in mindset where, to me now, I love being underestimated. Like, I crave it. Like, I'm 5'4" and I'm blonde and I still look like a kid. And so trust me, I've been confused for, every version of junior staff, of secretary, of all this. And in the back of my brain, I'm like, you just watch what's about to happen right now. And, women get so upset about this sometimes. They're like, well, no one takes me seriously. And I'm like, okay, well then what's the reverse? The reverse is being overestimated. And imagine the emotional burden of being overestimated perpetually, right? Like, imagine, we're talking about Elon, imagine being Elon Musk. You launch a rocket today and people look at you and they're like, oh, it exploded. And you're like, bro, I made a rocket. Like, think about the baseline level of people's expectations of you. And so I think it's a really good way to reframe your mind, because we can get into, a mentality that doesn't help us. And so I've tried over the years to take my complaining. I also really have this line that I'm like, complaining is the least attractive human trait in the world. And so when I get myself complaining, I'm like, Michele, what are you really complaining about?
Well, so that actually takes me to my next question, which is, and you mentioned, Elon's rocket that blew up. That was amazing news yesterday. I was blown away by that. But my question is, what kind of companies are you seeing out there that are exciting you? Obviously, Clearbanc is doing a great job investing in e-commerce. What sectors should we keep an eye on? Is it going to be robots? Is it robots walking around? I don't mind robots. They're pretty cool. Is it an AI bot of me? I like that AI bot. He's a cool guy. Like, I can hang out with him. But so what are you noticing, and what are the trends that you think we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of big ones. I still think we've barely scratched the surface on kind of like the AI of everything, right? Whether we're doing website copy, whether we're doing all sorts of other things. I think, AI, driverless cars, those are all really exciting. I think people should get very excited because we are going to build much better digital experiences than we ever have before. Like the same way, I mean, and I think this is so appropriate given it's a Toronto Life audience, but like the same way our communities were rich by these small local businesses where we had relationships with people, and I'm a huge fan of that, and I never want that to go away. But entrepreneurs were challenged for the first time really ever to build that digitally. And I think this like melding of offline and online experience is going to be really magical because we've just gotten a lot better at like, oh, you're Jason, you like things this way. Like, how do we get things more personalized? How do we find something? How do we understand our customer a lot better? And you can take the cynical view that like, oh, well, this is just, you know, Google and Facebook trying to make more money. And, but I'm talking about everything, like the way we engage with emails and with people's apps and like supporting, you know, local businesses and founders. Like I'm very excited with all the things I'm seeing on that front. And that's made just, you know, a huge, we made really big strides during the pandemic in that. And consumers are going to start to feel like that. Like, because these were tools that were largely being used by just large companies that are now being kind of made available to all of our local businesses. So I don't know, I'm excited about that. I think just generally there's going to be a huge increase in property probably just because people have now realized how important their home is. And these are not necessarily tech trends, but and then I think the funniest tech trend that I'm seeing right now is this like return to audio. Like everyone's so zoomed out, the Clubhouse just completely took off. And I think people were just so tired of like, you know, being on video all day long. So anyway, those would be some of them that I'd point out.
It's so funny when you're thinking about that hybrid experience now in terms of that bringing in real life, virtual, digital, et cetera. It's so funny. Like speaking of the bigger companies, I bought a stove one time and I returned it to Home Depot using text message. And I thought that was great that I'm texting a bot and then the bot just dealt with my stove issue. That was phenomenal. So, and you mentioned, you know, local businesses and that sort of really radical jump that they've all taken into the digital ecosystem. Yeah. It's been really, really dramatic. So what role do you think small, medium business, BIPOC women entrepreneurs are going to play in rebuilding this country post-pandemic?
I mean, I am very hopeful that it is a huge role. And I think that I think there was like, the first thing is like, how do we create new models of funding, right? We all knew that there was just so much bias in the bank system. There was so much bias in the VC system. So like, I'm very like encouraged by models like Clearbanc and seeing actually people copy us and seeing these decisions made data driven. I think that people are just at the end of wanting to do things that they don't want to do anymore, right? If we like lose all of our friends and connections and have to live through another year like this, it's like I might as well enjoy work. Like I joke now that all of my dreams are about work, and I used to think that was a bad thing, and I'm like, at least I have something intellectually stimulating to still do, right? It's like, yeah, sure, I'm not dreaming about being on a horse and traveling and all this other stuff, but at least I can have some kind of mental stimulation. But I just think that we live, and I believe that everyone in Toronto believes this, we live in such a better place where we just have a diversity of ideas and culture and people bringing, the parts of their heritage. And so we're now seeing way more support of those businesses. We're now seeing those entrepreneurs take the risk for the first time because they were fed up with the world out there. And so I'm just, I'm super hopeful. And I just hope we're a part of celebrating those stories.
That's wonderful. So we're going to be opening it up for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A chat box. But before we jump into those questions, my final question to you is, so is Dragon's Den as dramatic as it seems on television? It's an intense show and I love sort of watching that. But in terms of just the interaction, a majority of the businesses that go through that show, are they great?
I've had just some incredible success stories through that show. And, I don't think I imagined that when I first joined. I was like, oh, there's going to be, some like good small businesses and I'll certainly invest to be supportive. But like, I mean, I got really lucky, right? You guys can all watch the episode with Andy. All the other dragons are like $20 million valuation. This is crazy. Michelle's crazy. Tech's crazy. All the things are crazy. Yeah. 18 months later, sold for $100 million. It was just like, it was so incredible to be a part of that company and be a part of that journey. And Raj is just an extraordinary founder. Another one that's been incredible is this company called RVZ, which was the Airbnb for RVs. And, an ex-cop and an ex-military veteran started the company out of Ottawa. Some of the most like salt of the earth guys I've ever met. Like I've gone camping with them once a year for the last 3 years. Like they come to my birthday party, but they have built a monster of a company. I mean, they're 150 times bigger now today than when I invested. They have a real shot of winning, the entire North American market. And they're the hardest working guys I know. Like that company is just crushing it. And then, another one was True Local. So, I mean, I'm mostly keto. I do eat carbs sometimes, but for the most part, I just find it, I have no self-control. So I find it easier if I have to like cut out the carbs. I'm like, okay. So I end up eating, kind of more vegetables and meat. And so they have this, idea of like people like, there's people that don't want to eat meat, totally get that. But the people that do want to eat meat want to eat local and organic meats from nearby farmers. And so they would put together a box of frozen meat. You could choose exactly what was in it. It was from local farms. And, Mark came on the show with like $1 million in sales and, Black founder, just like so determined. And there was just like a spark in his eye. And he was so good after the deals closed. Cause we do a bunch of deals in the show and then it's actually the founders that do a lot of really good follow-up. They get your attention all over again. So we closed this deal and, he just sold the company for $17 million, like 3 years later. So I feel very blessed to be a part of these entrepreneurs' lives. These are all kind of built in Canada, made in Canada stories. The show is actually that intense. They don't make up any of that tension. It's partially because we film 10 episodes a day. And so you're just, hungry and tired and cranky. And so, you really do nip at each other. And then you get the benefit of, editing, where if we were to take the highlight reel of even the last hour, you get, a bunch of pretty punchy shots. And so we spend usually about an hour with each entrepreneur and that becomes a 7-minute segment on the show. And so we have, it's pretty fun to be able to do that. And I feel very lucky to be part of the show.
Amazing. Well, that actually takes me to my first question from the audience, which is from Lauren. Hi, Michelle. First, let me say you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for investing in entrepreneurs. I'm wondering, A, what's the ideal Clearbanc client? And B, after $1 billion invested, do you have any data on what makes some more successful than others?
Yeah. Okay. So Clearbanc minimum criteria is a minimum of 6 months in business and $10,000 in monthly revenue. That's for our core product. We just launched a product called Clear Angel, where we will start companies off when they're just at $2,000 of monthly revenue. So if you are that, just Michelle with 1L at clearbanc.com, feel free to send me an email and I can route you to the right member of our team, because we would love to be backing as many Toronto businesses as we can. What makes people more successful than others? Yeah, we actually try and give these insights right in your dashboard in terms of like what's making companies work really well versus what's not. A lot of it's understanding your own metrics and data. It's making sure like, you can get really successful off a little bit of early PR, a little bit of community traction, but it's actually like, do you understand how to use paid digital ads to continue to grow your audience? That gives you just an extraordinary amount of scale. And so understanding that in e-commerce and understanding the math around those unit economics are just core, because, if you're spending $1 to make 3, you should be doing that all day long, which is why like, it's really helpful if you have capital to be able to fuel that. And, overall, I've spent my whole career with founders. The most successful ones are the gritty ones. They're the ones that are willing to get scrappy. They're the ones that don't ever believe they're too precious. They're the ones that are constantly willing to roll up their sleeves and do whatever it takes to get something done.
Wow. That idea of sort of everyone keeps talking about the table stakes of data. Is it really hard to get good at that stuff? Like, is it really hard to get good at Facebook, or is that something you can like any resources you can recommend to get people
Oh
sort of
yeah, I mean, there's
better at it?
so many. Yeah, there's so many online resources. There's great agencies, but I think ultimately, like everyone that's selling something online should get the basics of learning this themselves. And so, taking like a really quick course online, understanding how, the basics, running your own numbers, being like, okay, I invested this much. I invested $5,000 in ads. I got X number of dollars in sales. Like, here were the people how long people are taking to go through the funnel. How do I increase my average basket size? Like, these are the things that learning at the earliest stages before you even hire anyone end up being incredibly useful as you go scale.
Mm. A question from John. What do you see as the future in healthy lifestyle and fitness industries?
Holy smokes. I don't know. I mean, I used to be a huge fan. I live at King and Spadina. And so, like a huge fan of like Barry's. There's so many fitness classes around me. And I think we're going to go back to that environment. I'm a believer that the world will mostly go back to normal after we have, mass vaccines. But I do think like I became like fully immersed in Peloton, right? Like I know all the instructors, I do all their different floor classes. Like, and it's actually like, I have like a weird relationship where I like know these people. I mean, I don't know them. They don't even know me. Right. But it's like it's a really interesting, it's a really interesting way. So I don't think I think we're going to still want to sweat together. Right. I think we're going to want to have all of that experience, but I don't know how much longer this is going to pan out. And I don't think Canada's put, their best foot forward with respect to vaccines and getting things rolled out and stuff. And so we might be in digital fitness land for a while longer.
Mm. Question
I'm
from
sorry, I don't have any good ideas. I wish I had better health and fitness ideas. I'm also struggling like you to be like, okay, now time for my 89th Peloton class.
Question from Adele. What can Main Street retail do to thrive beyond creating an e-commerce storefront?
What can Main Street retail do to thrive? I actually think it's like a lot of like very unique storytelling and like using like that's the fabric that builds our community that people want to follow. Like e-commerce is like a distribution strategy, right? Your customers should be able to walk in, they should be able to know you. You should be able to send them text messages when you get new stuff. You should be able to like follow up digitally, but that's like distribution and staying top of mind. The core of what, Main Street is like what makes our communities unique, right? And like, I don't know, whether you're finding unique knives or cheeses or shoes, or it doesn't matter. Like, it's actually thinking again about the products people need and they're going to want. And I'm a big believer that like kind of, again, when we get to vaccination, this is going to be the roaring 20s. I mean, people are going to want to do all of the things that we haven't been able to do, right? We all like, I think all the women, looked at our closets, full of high heels and just like laughed and laughed and laughed. We're like, when are we ever going to wear these again? My feet have never been healthier, by the way. I wear Birkenstocks at home every day for 365 days. But I think it is building that community along and that storytelling and, just that bit.
Amazing. Question from Trang. What is your favorite entrepreneurial or business book that you feel is worthy of reading? And what are you reading right now?
Last two books I read Blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman, which is kind of okay so far. And I read David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. I mean, so good. That was actually, I think, a lot of the book that shifted my mindset on COVID. Like, that guy is, for people who haven't followed David Goggins' career, I mean, he's done like a million of these ultra marathons where you like run for 72 hours straight. He was like this incredible Navy SEAL, dealt with so much hardship. He has this incredible rule that when you think you have like absolutely nothing left, like you can't like run one more step, you can't do anything, you still have like 60% left. And I think it's one of the most pieces, like
Wow.
pieces of my own personal resilience. Like there's lots of days where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. Like this is so tough. Like we'll just like grow a little bit slower. We'll just like not do this thing. And then I'm like, oh, Michelle, you have 60% left. And I think it's just an incredible book on mindset. I'm a huge David Goggins fan. Good business books. So here's my key on business books. You want to read stories of entrepreneurs and you want to read them when they're at the end of their career. Because if they're publishing them at the beginning, in the middle of their career, they still have like a narrative and a story to tell, right? When you read the Steve Jobs book, he was at the end of his life, and like, they don't sugarcoat anything. When you read, another one of the books that I love, I thought Chip Wilson's book was amazing. I mean, he talks about some mistakes that he made building Lululemon, and that's where you learn. And I'm not saying that these might be all the most fantastic entrepreneurs, but like, you get the story of how tough it was and how they had to iterate through these journeys. So I actually really like Little Black Stretchy Pants. That was a good one. And then as we've scaled our company, I think, No Rules Rules, the Netflix book, was very, very instrumental on creating team dynamics. Other couple tactical ones. Every entrepreneur, especially when you're starting out, should read Influence by Robert Cialdini, the best book on sales ever. I try and read it like once a year, and I started reading that book in undergrad. And then on negotiations, Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss's book is like AAA. It's really, really good.
Wow. And we're gonna
That
send
was a lot, right? That was too many, Jason. But I got a few.
Yeah, but we're gonna send that list of books to everyone afterwards in an email, just so that they have them. Those are great resources. Krista has a question, which is, what was your experience in finding mentorship? So any advice, resources on where to look for it? I'm a sole owner of a female-founded media company, and I'm struggling on where to start to find mentors.
Oh, awesome. And you support a true local. Thank you. So, okay. We came up with this word mentor, and you like build into a mentor. I don't think you start with a mentor. So Sheryl Sandberg, actually, I didn't love her book, but she has a really funny chapter where she talks about how like people would come up to her and they'd be like, "Hi, will you be my mentor?" It's kind of like coming up to someone in a bar being like, "Hi, will you be my boyfriend?" And you're like, what is going on here? Like, that's not how to build like friendships and relationships. Great mentors at their core are incredible friendships. And Krista, I'm completely sympathetic that that it has been much harder to meet people. But when you meet people, even when you can connect on a Zoom, or you can connect, offline, or you can reach out for help, you want to always think about how do you build a great friendship. And so even if that means there's a career gap of 20 years between you two, or even if there's a huge skill gap, I believe that I can always be helpful to people. And so I think about even the smallest things to do, right? Like, I don't know, if you're young and someone's older, like maybe their kids need help getting into school and need someone there. Sometimes it's just like listening really well. I remember I was trying to close this deal with this one big bank executive, and he was an American who was working from Canada. And he was like, yeah, my whole weekend's going to be consumed with this, like a visa approval process. He goes, because I have to count my days. And I was like, oh, and I just sent him this link, and it's really cool. The government has a system where they track the days for you. And so you can see every time you enter the US and Canada. And he's like, oh my God, this saved me like 8 hours this weekend, or else you have to truly like go through your calendar and count all the days. And so it's not about a cost. It's about, can you build depths of those friendships, and then get those people's advice as you are building or growing. My next biggest piece of advice is try and become friends with the people that you really want to be. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that people take advice from people they have no desire to be. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And look, lots of people give you unsolicited advice. We all have to deal with largely our own parents that give us a lot of unsolicited advice. And it's all super well-intentioned, but I now even look at the world of like business gurus. Like, there are people who have built businesses, and there's people that have built businesses that I've admired, and I really want to take their advice. And then I think there's a lot of people that write business books or write business articles, and they haven't actually run a fruit stand. And I don't think those are good people to take advice from, because they advocate for things that are impossible if you were an entrepreneur to really do. And so I think we have to look at this, because sometimes we end up just putting everyone on a pedestal, and you should just pick and choose the people that you're like, okay, I want to be him, or I want to be her. And go and by attempting to build a great friendship, you will build a great mentorship.
I love that. And this takes us to our final question, which is from Chantal. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
What advice would I give? Oh my gosh. I think I would just, I just sweated all the small stuff. Like I took every decision so seriously. I thought it was all like so, and I had to unlearn being a perfectionist. That is a horrible trait as a founder. You do not win by being a perfectionist. You win by going at 3 times the speed at 60 to 75% accuracy. You do not win. You do not win any other way. And so that would be one thing. I'd be like, Michelle, stop being a perfectionist. It's not going to matter. And the second thing that I would tell myself is to just not beat myself up for all the small stuff. Really think about, and I now use like a process now, especially like I call it like the lean into the pain. Like now when like I've really fucked up or I've made a mistake, I like sit down and I like put my cell phone in another room and I'm like, okay, Michelle, what did you learn? What did you really learn? How do you not make this mistake? And then I like write it down in my journal. I like bring some ideas. I like try and like get my partner to hold me accountable to like how we're not gonna, make these mistakes again. And then I actually move on. And so here's the problem. Most people think about their mistakes for a long time and they like dwell. So they like feel bad about them for a long time. But feeling bad and learning are actually very different like mental activities for you to do. And so you don't actually get better if you're sad about something for longer. You learn something if you like force your brain to learn something for the pain that you just experienced for your own mistakes or your own fuck ups or whatever it is. And so that's been a really important part of my own journey as an entrepreneur is that, and then I just move on. I'm like, okay, we got other things to do now. But yeah.
That is incredible advice. It's really good advice. I'm dwelling right now.
You're dwelling?
No, I'm joking.
But you can but you know what I mean, right?
Yes,
like
I do.
Like by punishing ourselves, we somehow like learn more. That's actually like not true. Yes. It's you just created a situation where you can be more depressed and you're like, that's not also a great place where most of us want to be, right?
Exactly.
And so I've had to differentiate those, or else you have just flippancy, right? You have like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. And like, everyone's going to screw up and mine doesn't matter. And like, I'll just like move on to the next thing. Like it is important that, that we take like our own mistakes and our own relationships really seriously and try and do better next time. But it is certainly not helpful to dwell.
Amazing. Well, that takes us to the end of the Fireside Chat. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was amazing.
So fun to do.
I learned a ton. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Looking forward to seeing you at some upcoming Fireside Chats. We're actually hosting Peter Mansbridge next. So that's going to be a good one. So we're going to be talking about the future of Canada on that one as well. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining us again today. And we'll send the resources that you outlined in an email to all of our attendees following this experience. But thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. But thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye, guys.